Welcome to Lord Nightmare channel. We share scary stories with rainy ambience. I hope this video helps you in some way to sleep, relax, or just be entertained for a while. If you enjoy it, please think about subscribing and hitting the thumbs up button to help my channel out. Now let's begin.
It started like any other listing on a roommate app. I was in between places, needing a temporary spot until I figured out my next move. The ad seemed normal enough. Quiet apartment, spacious room, female roommate. $600 per month. Must be clean and respectful. Perfect, I thought. The rent was cheap, the photos looked decent, and I needed something fast. The girl's name was Lisa. When we met to check out the apartment, she was off. Polite, but her smile lingered a second too long. Her eyes darted around the room as if she was looking for approval or maybe reassurance. But the apartment was clean and cozy, and I convinced myself I was overthinking it. People can be a little awkward. It doesn't mean anything. The first few days were fine. Lisa worked night shifts at a local diner, so I barely saw her. She kept to herself during the day, and I liked the quiet. But then, small things started to unsettle me. One morning, I noticed my coffee mug was moved. It was subtle, but I always kept it on the second shelf, and it was now on the counter. I shrugged it off. Maybe I forgot. Then, a few days later, my shampoo bottle was empty. I'd only used it twice since I moved in. Again, I brushed it aside. Roommates forget boundaries sometimes, right? But things escalated quickly. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of faint humming. At first, I thought it was from the street, but it was coming from inside the apartment. It sounded like an old nursery rhyme, soft, eerie, and completely out of place. I stayed in bed, frozen until it stopped. The next morning, Lisa acted completely normal, as if nothing happened. I wanted to ask her about it, but felt embarrassed. What if she thought I was accusing her of something weird? A week later, I was heading to bed when I noticed Lisa's door was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to look, but something caught my eye. On her dresser was a photo of me. It wasn't one I recognized, but it was definitely me. I stood there, heart racing, trying to make sense of it. Why would she have a picture of me? The floor creaked and I jumped. Lisa's voice came from behind me. Looking for something? I spun around, stammering. Sorry, I thought I heard a noise. She didn't blink, just stared, her head tilted slightly to the side. You shouldn't go through other people's things, she said flatly before closing the door. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. I decided I needed to leave, but I couldn't afford to break the lease. I began searching for other options and avoided Lisa as much as possible. But avoiding her seemed to make her more present. She'd knock on my door late at night, claiming she needed to borrow something. Once, she stood there for what felt like minutes without saying anything before walking away. One night, I came home late after meeting a friend. The apartment was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Lisa's door was wide open, but she wasn't inside. I tried to ignore the pit in my stomach and went straight to my room. When I opened the door, my blood ran cold. Every single item in my room had been moved. My clothes were spread out on the bed, my drawers were open, and on my pillow was a note written in messy, childlike handwriting. "I like knowing you." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but just as I pressed call, the line went dead. No service. My phone had always worked fine before. I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door, but the lock was jammed. My hands trembled as I struggled to twist it, but it wouldn't budge. Then I heard it, the humming, coming from behind me. I turned slowly, and there she was, standing in the dark hallway, holding a kitchen knife. Her head tilted, that unnerving smile plastered across her face. "Why are you trying to leave me?" she whispered. I backed away, my mind racing. "Lisa, I'm not, I need some fresh air." Her smile faltered, her grip tightening on the knife. "You don't like it here?" I've been so good to you. Lisa, please just put the knife down. We can talk. Before I could finish, she lunged. I dodged, adrenaline kicking in, and slammed my door shut, locking it. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the handle, praying it would hold. She banged on the door, screaming now. You can't leave me. You're mine. I looked around, desperate for an escape. The window. It was my only option. I threw it open and climbed out onto the fire escape, my heart pounding. As I descended, I heard her laughter echoing into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station and begged the cashier to call the police. When they arrived, they found the apartment empty. Lisa was gone. The cops said she must have slipped out before they got there. They found a small room behind her closet filled with photos of me, some taken inside my old apartment before I even knew her. To this day, I don't know how she found me or why she chose me. But I moved far away, changed my number, and never looked back. Life eventually returned to normal, or as normal as it could after what happened. I found a new place in a city far away. My new apartment was tiny, but it felt safe. No roommates, no strangers. Just me and my locked doors. Weeks passed, then months. The fear subsided little by little. I even started to convince myself it was over. Lisa was just a disturbed person who had moved on to someone else, or hopefully gotten caught. I told myself this over and over. It was the only way I could sleep at night. But then, the little things started again. It began with the feeling of being watched. That prickling sensation on the back of your neck when someone's eyes are on you. I'd glance around on the street or in the grocery store, but I never saw anyone. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I came home from work and found my front door unlocked. I stood there, heart pounding, convinced I had locked it. I always double-checked. Always. But I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was just distracted that morning. Maybe I was being paranoid. I stepped inside, and everything seemed normal. No sign of forced entry. No missing items. But when I went into my bedroom, I froze. On my bed, perfectly centered on the pillow, was a single photo. A selfie of me, taken that very day. I hadn't taken any photos of myself. My legs nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stay calm. I grabbed the photo with trembling hands and flipped it over. On the back was a note, written in that same messy, childlike handwriting, "Miss me?" I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and I felt the walls closing in. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but the line was dead. No service. It was happening again. I ran for the door, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard it. Humming. It was faint, coming from somewhere inside the apartment. My blood ran cold. She was here. She'd found me. I bolted for the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. The humming grew louder, closer. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold onto the knife. "Lisa," I screamed, "I'm not afraid of you. Get out of my house." Silence. For a moment, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. I crept toward the hallway, knife raised, scanning every shadow. Then, from behind me, a voice. Her voice. Soft, chilling. I never left. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the empty apartment and the echo of her words. My heart thundered in my chest as I backed into the corner, knife still in hand. The lights flickered and then went out. I don't know how long I stayed there in the darkness, knife clutched tightly, waiting for her to make her move. But she never did. When the sun rose, the power came back on, and the apartment was empty. No Lisa. No photos. Just me, shaking and exhausted. The police found no evidence of a break-in. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe even my own paranoia playing tricks on me. But I knew better. I moved again. New city, new apartment. No forwarding address. But no matter where I go, no matter how many locks I install, I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there, waiting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when everything is quiet, I still hear it. The humming. Closer, closer. She's not done with me yet. few months ago, I found a listing for a small studio apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was perfect, cheap rent, fully furnished, and within walking distance of my job. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Graves, seemed polite but oddly hurried during the showing. He barely answered my questions before handing me the keys and disappearing. I chalked it up to him being busy or just uninterested in small talk. The place was cozy but felt strange. The air was heavy and the silence was oppressive, but I told myself it was just my imagination. New places take time to feel like home, right? The first night, as I was unpacking, I noticed something odd. The closet door wouldn't stay shut. I'd close it, hear a faint click, but minutes later, it would be open again. Not wide, just a crack. Enough to notice. I wedged a chair under the handle before going to bed, thinking it was just a loose latch. It wasn't a big deal. At least, that's what I told myself. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a soft creaking sound. It was subtle, almost rhythmic, like someone shifting their weight on an old wooden floor. I lay still, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound was coming from the closet, the one I had barricaded. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it toward the closet. The chair was still in place, but the door was cracked open, just enough to see darkness inside. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. No response. I convinced myself it was nothing. A draft, maybe. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I checked the closet. It was empty, just a few wire hangers and an old coat left by the previous tenant. Still, the unease lingered. Over the next few nights, the noises continued. The creaking, soft tapping. Once, I thought I heard a faint whisper, but it was so quiet I couldn't be sure. I started avoiding the apartment, staying late at work or finding excuses to hang out with friends. Anything to avoid going home. One night, after staying late at a coffee shop, I came back to find my front door ajar. My stomach dropped. I knew I had locked it before leaving. I stepped inside cautiously, my phone's flashlight leading the way. Everything looked normal. Nothing was missing or out of place, except for the closet. The door was wide open now, and that old coat was lying on the floor in the middle of the room. I picked it up and something fell out of the pocket, a Polaroid photo. My hands shook as I held it up to the light. It was a picture of me, sitting at the coffee shop earlier that evening. My blood turned to ice. I ran out of the apartment and didn't come back until morning. I called Mr. Graves, demanding to know if anyone else had access to the apartment. He was quiet for a moment before sighing. "I didn't want to scare you," he said finally, "but the last tenant had some issues. Said she felt like someone was living in the walls. She left in a hurry, but we never found anything." I thought it was just her imagination. Living in the walls? My mind raced. Was someone hiding in the apartment? Watching me? That night, I decided to search every inch of the place. I tapped on the walls, checked under the bed, inside every cabinet. Nothing. The closet was the last place to check. As I inspected it more closely, I noticed something odd. A small, almost invisible seam in the back wall. I pushed on it, and the panel creaked open. Behind it was a narrow crawl space, dark and cramped. The air inside was damp and smelled of mildew. I shone my flashlight inside, and my heart nearly stopped. There were blankets, wrappers, and dozens of Polaroid photos. All of me, sleeping, eating, sitting on the couch. Some were taken from angles that were impossible, unless someone had been inside the apartment with me. At that moment, I heard the front door slam shut. I turned, heart racing, but the apartment was empty. I grabbed my phone and called the police. They searched the place and the crawl space but found no one. They told me the photos were probably left behind by the previous tenant stalker. I moved out the next day. But even now, in my new place, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. Late at night, I still hear faint creaks and whispers. Sometimes, I wake up and find my closet door cracked open. It was supposed to be a quick stop. I'd been driving for hours, trying to make it to a work conference in a city I'd never been to. My GPS, which had been acting up all day, suddenly announced I had arrived. The screen showed the destination as a bed and breakfast I had booked, but when I looked up, it was clear this wasn't it. The house was old, almost ancient looking, and set back from the road with an overgrown yard. The shutters were cracked, the paint peeling, and the porch sagged like it was exhausted from holding the place up. A dim, flickering porch light barely cut through the darkness. I double-checked the address. Somehow, I was at the right spot, or so it seemed. Maybe the website photos were just really outdated. I debated turning around, but the clock read 11:45 p.m. I was exhausted, and the idea of driving around in the dark looking for a new place wasn't appealing. I grabbed my bag and headed up the creaking steps. The door opened before I even knocked. A woman stood there. She looked to be in her late 50s, with wiry gray hair pulled into a loose bun. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes deep-set and watery, but she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be here for the room," she said, her voice thin and raspy. "Yeah, I think so. Is this Cedar Hill Bed and Breakfast?" I asked, hesitating. She nodded slowly. "Come in. You must be tired." Something about the way she said it made me pause, but I forced myself to step inside. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of damp wood and something faintly metallic. The entryway was dim, lit by a single bulb that cast long, eerie shadows. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, revealing patches of rotting plaster underneath. "Follow me," she said, turning and shuffling down the hall. Her footsteps barely made a sound. I followed her to a narrow staircase, and as we climbed, the smell grew stronger. It wasn't just metallic, it was coppery, like blood. My stomach churned, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to sleep and leave early in the morning. She stopped at the top of the stairs and gestured to a door. "This is your room," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Thanks," I said, stepping inside. The room was small, with a single bed, a wooden chair, and a dresser. The window was covered with heavy curtains that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. "You'll be the only guest tonight," she added before closing the door behind me. I set my bag down and locked the door. Something about her words nagged at me. The only guest. Wasn't this supposed to be a bed and breakfast? Where were the other guests? Or the staff? I tried to shake the unease and lay down on the creaky bed. The mattress was lumpy, and the sheets smelled faintly of mildew. I stared at the ceiling, telling myself I was overreacting. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, just outside my door. I held my breath, listening as they stopped right in front of my room. A soft tap followed, like fingernails gently raking against the wood. "Is everything all right in there?" The woman's voice called softly, almost too softly. I didn't answer. My pulse thundered in my ears. After a few moments, the footsteps retreated, fading into silence. I sat up, every nerve in my body on edge. I decided I needed to leave, no matter how late it was. I grabbed my bag and quietly unlocked the door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt colder, heavier. I tiptoed down the stairs, each step creaking beneath me. When I reached the front door, I noticed something I hadn't before. The walls of the entryway were lined with photographs, old, black and white portraits of people. But the faces, they all looked terrified. Wide eyes, mouths frozen in silent screams. My breath hitched as I realized something else. The door didn't have a lock on the inside. There was no way to open it. Panic set in as I jiggled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard the sound of bare feet on the wooden floor. "You're not supposed to leave," the woman's voice rasped. "Not yet." I spun around, and there she was, standing at the base of the stairs. Her smile was gone now, replaced by a hollow, lifeless expression. In her hand, she held a large, rusted knife. "You didn't read the rules, did you?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Once you're here, you're part of the house." I backed away, my mind racing. Before I could react, she lunged. The last thing I remember was the weight of her on top of me, the cold blade slicing into my chest, and her voice in my ear, "Don't worry. You'll make a beautiful photograph." Weeks later, a new traveler pulled up to the house, following directions from an outdated website listing. They noticed the flickering porch light and stepped hesitantly onto the creaking steps. Inside the entryway, the photographs watched silently, one of them showing a familiar face. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a creepy or unsettling experience with a roommate? Maybe something that sent chills down your spine? Share your stories in the comments below or send me a message. Let's see who has the spookiest roommate encounter. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. Stay safe, and remember, not every roommate is what they seem.